Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here today to present the 2018 version of the Øresund Investor Climate Report. But first, I would just have two brief slides about our company, Nye Consulting. We're working with early-stage life science and tech companies, and we support them throughout pre-seed to Series A and IPO investment phases. We're a process-based consultancy, and we offer consultancy products that help our clients to reach the next valuation and value inflection points. So we support with market potential establishment, we develop go-to-market strategies and business plans, and we also support with fundraising and partnering and licensing. So we're actually reducing the risk, the commercial risk for investors later on in the investment cycle. We work with leading innovation offices and investors in the Nordics, and we're very proud of our clients and work really closely with them. So, looking at the Øresund Investor Climate Report, the first report was launched in 2016 with the objective to identify opportunities and improvement areas for the investor climate in the Øresund region. Pretty soon it grew to include the rest of the Nordics as well. And it's the reason why we did this is to lower the entrance barriers for investors from an international scale, as well as supporting our clients in their fundraising activities. And the analysis variables that we look into are the deal flow development, challenges, the opportunities, the IPO activity, and also future projection. And the objective with each of these reports is to have a 12 to 18 months progression, looking at the future. In March this year, we launched the 2018 edition, slightly larger, as you can see, and more extensive. And it looked at the major events during 2018 and also looked onwards towards 2018 and beyond. We included a market outlook looking at the US and European key figures as well as the same analytical variables as we used before. I could also mention that we will be starting the work with the next edition that will be launched in Q1 of 2019. It's also important to note that the report is completely financed and developed by Nye Consulting and independent, and it's based on 25 leading VCs and corporate VCs and technology transfer offices in Denmark and Sweden, and their in-depth interviews with these players. You can download the report for yourselves from our website and look more into this, who has actually participated, but it's leading investors. Before we go into the actual findings, I need to mention as well that this is one perspective of the investor climate. There are more, but you should treat it's not a statistical truth that you are about to see. So just make note of that. We're actually going to stay at the key findings. There are much information in this report, but we'll stay at the key findings, and then you can look and investigate the rest for yourselves later. But starting up with a quote, you could say that the past year's success is beginning to pay off in a growing and maturing ecosystem. And international investors also recognize this as they visit in increasing numbers. And it's quite interesting to be standing on a stage at Medicon Village, which is a testament to the success of the ecosystem in the Øresund region. As we heard earlier today, the number of employees have surpassed that of AstraZeneca when they were here before. We also see a lot of great success cases that has been presented here today, Centella being one of them, and there are many more. So success breeds success, and we could see that from the investors, that actually we're attracting international interest now due to the success cases that we bring, and that are sprung out of this maturing ecosystem that we see. We also have, because of that, opportunity to interact early with big corporate investors. We're seeing an increase in interest from them to interact with early stage companies before they actually are investment ready. But they want to keep track of everyone and all of them, if possible, to be able to get to know them and to make sure to be able to invest in 2 to 3 years after first contact. That's something we try to facilitate, and one of the reasons why we launched this report to start with. We also see an importance of attracting US and European investors, because they are the major capital pools of the world. We can see later, we have some brief numbers from PitchBook illustrating the massive funds that are available there. And for that, we need to increase the visibility of early stage cases, something we try to do constantly with our clients. But it's actually a team effort. To start with, the individual CEOs need to make sure to have ongoing dialogues and try to make that effort, even though it's hard to do in the everyday life that you work with as a CEO of an early stage company. But it's also a team effort. We know that the incubators are working hard. Smile being one good example here to attract investors. Medicon Village doing it as well as Medeon Science Park, and not forgetting Medicon Valley Alliance and Invest in Scania are doing a great job in this, as well as BioStock right here, of course. So that's really important. But we also see the amazing opportunities that we have in Sweden and the Nordics in particular to list companies early at First North and the Spotlight markets. There's only one other market in Europe where this is possible, and that's AIM in London. And they're normally more mature and have come a bit further compared to others. And we see that a lot of companies have used this good opportunity in the fundraising toolbox to list themselves and have a great IPO and start. But that's only the start of a fundraising journey for a life science company. So you need to keep those milestones checked and approved, as we can see from 2QRX, for instance. They had a great plan of doing that and keeping that in mind. So we will see interesting times ahead when the listed companies need to fill their reach their milestones and their value inflection points. Just some brief numbers on 2017 and the investment numbers there from PitchBook. You can see that the first time since the dot-com crisis, the overall invested capital surpassed $80 billion by venture capital, which is quite extraordinary. Corporate venture capitalists invested heavily, and they invested 37 billion. And you see also a great investment in life science. And a very interesting and important trend is also that the big pharma companies continued the trend of acquiring early stage companies to fill their R&D pipelines. That's very important for us here, as we have strong science and very promising companies to work with. Looking at the European perspective, you can see there the numbers are slightly smaller. But there's still a heavy and great activity here in Europe. And you can also see that corporate venture capitalists are investing quite heavily. Two quotes that are interesting, that you can see that the larger deals were possible in Europe due to US investors coming into the European area looking for deal flow with lower valuations at good quality companies. You could also see that the corporate venture capitalists focus 60% of their investments on early stage deals. Both these quotes are really good opportunities for our companies. So there's a lot of interesting additional insights to gain from this report. So do take the chance to download it for free at our website. And with that, I would like to say thank you.
Thank you, Johan. Really interesting. I'm actually going to invite you to sit down, and we're going to have a Q&A panel. Also want to invite back Ole from 2QRX. And we have a new guest, Fredrik Rahl of Sedermera Fondkommission. Please welcome to the stage. You got a mic there.
Thanks.
You use this. Use this. Easy. Yeah. So... Sorry. Come on up, Johan. I almost forgot. we have a representative for the non-listed companies, yes, which is really important. So the future of the Nordic early stage financing scene, that's the theme of this discussion. I would actually like to ask Fredrik first. Sedermera, you work with a lot of companies. You help them out financing, IPOs, and so on. What are the current trends in early financing in the Nordic region?
I would like to say that there is it's pretty popular among investors today with different kind of tech companies, and I think it's very exciting. We are working a lot with the Danish market as well as the Swedish, of course. By working with the markets in parallel, we're trying to build a larger retail market, and that's really interesting. And we are seeing a really nice trend in Denmark among the retail investors. So to add on that on the Swedish market, that's really interesting, I think.
So there's a big interest in Danish retail investors looking at companies not listed in Sweden. That's because they don't have quite the same market conditions in Denmark, right?
That's truth.
Yeah. Ole, coming then as a Danish company to Sweden, or listed in Sweden, what's your key learnings from the journey you've had so far?
First of all, I'm happy to hear that the environment is so good as it is. And I think what we have learned is that we are different. It's almost like our cancers, that it's extremely heterogeneous. And when I hear politicians, especially in Denmark, they say, oh, we want to beat the Swedes. And then they come up with Zlatan or something like that and say, I mean, why should we do that? I mean, as a company, we want just a marketplace. And the Nordics, we should push the differences. And I think what we see now is that the retail market is very different, but it's coming in Denmark, but it will always be different than the Swedish. So let's use that. And I think it's very positive. And I've seen that also with a couple of the new IPOs that we see Danish retail investors investing in Sweden. So, I mean, why should we struggle so hard to get the same in Denmark? We have a great trading place here. And so,
yeah.
So as a company.
You can all come to Sweden.
I'm not a politician,
no problem.
but...
you can all come to Sweden.
Oh, we love it.
Yeah. So, Fredrik, then, given the fact that the market always evolving and quite a lot of companies have been listed in the last years, what should companies do to stay competitive and interesting in regards to investors?
If you look at the listed companies, I think the main thing is to build trust in the market and to keep the trust, basically by delivering values to the table and keep your promises in the market. Then you will have a really nice public financing muscle, you could say. And it's pretty fair if you do not deliver, the muscle isn't that strong. Pretty fair, I think. So.
Pretty fair, yeah. And Johan, in your report, you mentioned then that success breeds success. I mean, that should be true then for the investing climate as well. If the companies deliver results, investors are happy. Happy investors invest more money, more companies, and so on. Is that correct?
Yes, that's a good way of summarizing it. But you need to have a commercial plan, and we see often and stick to it. And if you don't stick to it, you need to communicate that to the market. We often see when it comes to non-listed companies and early stage companies that when they interact with global investors, particularly from the corporate VC part, that we have great science, we have great opportunities in the Nordics, and they usually see us as Nordics, not necessarily Sweden and Denmark or Norway. They see us more or less as one region. So we really need to work together. But they really wish to see a strong commercial understanding and plan. So it's important to have both and not forget that in an early stage, even early stage companies need to think through the commercial plan.
Johan, you're an early stage company, you could say, for sure. How have you been working with these aspects during your journey and regards to financing so far?
Yeah, obviously we have already been involved in funding in early stages, such as Johan mentioned in his presentation. And apart from the very obvious challenges R&D companies of our kind has, like technical challenges and clinical challenges, of course, the financial challenge is at least as important in the beginning. The small markets Ole is mentioning in Sweden is definitely a good opportunity for us. So we have tried in our early stages to act in a way where we want to communicate that we are prepared for these steps already now. That's what we have done.
So it's a constant struggle then maybe to secure financing to drive your projects forward. Have you been exploring any paths out of the ordinary, so to speak?
We have been evaluating some different options, especially during this year. But I can't at this point mention what it has been. But there are different options as well as government funding that we have also received in early stages. So there are different forms of funding or support to get, of course, for companies in our position.
Yeah. And Ole, even though you're a listed company, you did an IPO, and you are at this point more well known to a broader base of investors. Yet soft funding is still important at your stage as well. You could tell you had some really good news lately in that section.
Yes, we love soft money, and I think 2cureX have raised about now probably about 10 million euros, and it's nice money, but maybe even more important, it is nice networks. So the hospitals that I mentioned that are key to 2cureX, a number of them have come through these EU programs. So I think even though you are listed, you should continue to grab these soft money because it gives a tremendous network.
Plus, it's non-dilutive.
It is non-dilutive.
Which the stockholders love.
Yep.
Yeah.
We as well. Yeah.
So, Fredrik, what's from Sedermera's perspective? What's your projection for the next 6 to 12 months as far as financing trends go?
We are actually very positive, as I mentioned before, working with the Denmark side and the Swedish side in parallel. Of course, we have noticed the exchanges around the world. It's a little bit shaky, of course. But I think there isn't any reason to push any panic button or so, because we saw the Crimea crisis, we had the Brexit, the US election, and so on, and everyone was pretty afraid, to be honest. But it became almost small bumps on the road. So I think stay calm, analyze, and take control matters if things are changing. So we are positive. So.
Johan, having then talked to a lot of representatives from the corporate VC side and the VC funds, what's the sentiment you're getting from their perspective then into the future?
Well, the findings that I've presented here was based on interviews from October until February, October 17 to February 18. We will do those interviews again soon, but they were cautious for the long term, but the near term was quite positive. I mean, if you look at the interviews that we've had during 2016, even they said, well, for now it's great, but soon no one knows what will happen because we've had a long period of very positive times. So I guess the difference is that everyone is looking for signs and will be ready when a correction comes, but no one knows what will happen. No. That's the thing.
Someone said, I interviewed someone quite recently who said money will always follow the science. So if the science is good, the money will come. Is that a conclusion we could agree on, you think?
Yeah, well,
If I can add one thing,
Yeah, sure.
I think it's important to mention here. Pretty often I got the question, okay, we have approximately 900 listed companies in Sweden. Is there enough money? That's a classical question, basically. But I think we should not forget that we see more capital injected in the micro and small cap market as well. So I think there is a pretty nice balance today in the market. It's impossible to say what happens in a year, but the trend is we see more money from family offices, funds, etc., that did not invest in the segment a couple of years ago. So I think it's important to mention the balance is pretty good, actually.
And I'd love to conclude then with hearing that the biotech and pharma and diagnostics sector is actually really attractive within investors. Thank you all guys for joining us.